just owning that type of asset, right? It's kind of like your emergency fund in a way, right? If anything happens to you, if you need that money, not only do I have the cash flow coming in, but if I wanted to, I could use the equity. Worst case scenario, I could sell it if I wanted to. So there are a lot of things that I could do with that property. But in addition to that, I'm learning so much, right? Not just about how to buy rental property, but even managing tenants, right? We self-manage. So I manage all the tenants, all the issues, select my own tenants as well. We have found all our own rental properties.
Yeah.
We have analyzed, all the different areas. We've run numbers for weeks trying to find the right rental property. We've made countless offers that we lost. So all of that has just been such a huge learning process. But I would say the biggest thing that it's done, it's honestly gave me ability to just quit my 9 to 5 and jump into real estate as a realtor full time, which is not something that I think I would have been comfortable with had I not had those rental properties as backup.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today I am very pleased and honored to have someone on the podcast that you may already know. You might have seen her on social media. Eliane is very active. And we're going to go dive into a little bit more about her story and how she became an investor, a broker, and everything. Before we do, I just want to remind you a few things. First of all, we had a wonderful event this week. Go to the realestateeffect.ca website, check out the dates for the new events. Also, check out the meetup on meetup.com. We have them regularly, and I look forward to meeting you there. It's a great way to connect with people who listen to the podcast, but then we get to meet in person, and that's really fun. Get to have a drink and all that. And then, second of all, it's been a good time over the last for the podcast. Thank you for sharing the episode. Please leave a rating, send me some comments, send me some feedback. I've had a few questions, and I will try to answer them soon and prepare an episode just about that. So thank you very much for your involvement. And now I would like to welcome my dear friend, Eliane. How are you today?
Hello. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So you and I had corresponded a few times. We had lunch a couple of months ago. We had said that you were at the last event earlier this week, and we had said that it was time to share your story because you have simply kicked butt. So very simply, let's start with how in the world did you get involved in real estate investing? How did you start?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. How I started, so this all started during the pandemic. Everyone was home. I was working from home at the time. I wasn't in real estate at all, by the way. So I was working from home. I had some extra time. I've always been one to keep my cost of living low. And so I really just had extra money that I'm like, let me try to figure out what to do with this. Let me take the time to learn more about investing, whether it's in the stock market, real estate, everything, and just figure out how to really grow my money and just take more control of it. So I actually started off with the stock market. I did that for a while. And then once I was done with that, I still had money left over and I was like, let me learn more about real estate. My boyfriend was actually running an Airbnb at the time and I just saw how well it was doing. And I'm like, hey, I need to get into this.
Yeah.
So took a little while to figure out kind of how to go about it. The goal initially wasn't even to purchase an investment property. The goal was to purchase a property that we'd be renting out to someone for maybe a year or two and then eventually move into it. But that strategy just didn't work at all when it came to finding a property because you're looking for two different things, right? You're looking for a primary residence, but then also a property that could cash flow. So one is kind of an emotional purchase and one is just based on numbers, and it's hard to mix those two things together.
Yeah.
So after a while, we just realized, okay, let's just look for an investment property. We're not looking for a primary residence right now, and we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. So at that point, it just became about numbers, right? So what makes sense in terms of cash flow, in terms of area, And once we narrowed that down, we were able to find property within a couple months. And we were just able to gain that knowledge in terms of what to look for,
Yeah.
which meant that we were able to reproduce the same thing a lot quicker afterwards, after that first one.
So you
Yeah.
got tempted, and I was gonna say sucked into it because your boyfriend was doing some Airbnb and you saw some payments
Mm-hmm.
of a couple $1,000 a month and thought like, that might make sense. Um,
Yeah, it was like, this is amazing. Like as a side hustle, it was so good.
yeah. And
Um,
depending on how you're organized and stuff, you can also do it so
hmm
it's not too time consuming. So then you said you wanted to find a
hmm
property where you guys could go live into afterwards. Is that what ended up
Yeah,
happening?
no, not at all. Not at all. We realized that having a primary residence, because I was renting at the time,
Hmm.
I was renting for extremely cheap. And we realized that having a primary residence would affect our borrowing power and our ratios, which would then in turn make it even harder to qualify for another property. So at that point, I was like, hey, let's just go and purchase more rental properties. And when we get to the point where we really just want to move out and get a primary residence, we'll do that.
Hmm.
And so that's what we did. We just went on that way for a couple of years and eventually ended up getting a primary residence as like the
Yeah,
last property.
as the
Yeah.
last property, and that makes sense. And it's actually a good advice to people. It's like your first purchase shouldn't necessarily be a primary residence. Is go and acquire some rental, and then after a
Yeah.
few, you can do
Yeah.
that, and that's a very wise decision. We didn't start that way, and you can't go back, but that would have been a good strategy for young people who are listening and who might want to try to do it differently. So you got that first property, and then can you kind of like walk us through the process, like what kind of property is it? Where is it located? Roughly what you pay for it?
Yeah. So that property is located in Vaudreuil,
Hmm.
in the new section of Vaudreuil, downtown, really. And the way we went about it was really just trying to find areas where rents were good, but purchasing prices were lower, which means cash flow. And so that was one of the areas that stood out immediately, especially towards the beginning of the pandemic. It was Vaudreuil. So we started doing visits in that area. We started making offers. Obviously, lost a lot of offers because at a certain point, if the numbers don't work for you, you walk away, right?
Yeah.
Go on to the next and keep trying. And eventually, this property. So we're really just looking all the time. I had my search on my app on my phone. I was checking every morning, every night, and I had it refreshed, right? My search was saved. And so one morning I opened my phone, I opened my search, I see a new listing, and we just pounced on it. There were visits scheduled, I believe, for the following week, and we just put in a bully offer and got it. And they ended up canceling all the other visits. And that was our first rental property. Found our first tenant, still had no idea what we were doing, right? Because as much as he'd done Airbnb, we never had a long-term tenant. So that was another process. That was another thing to learn. So there's always something to learn, right?
For sure, for sure. So then
Yeah,
you started with that one property, and it's often kind of one of the scariest because you don't really know the
definitely,
acquisition process and what to look for,
definitely.
and you
Yeah.
think the price is good, but once you have it under contract, you're like, oh, am I overpaying? What am I doing? So then, okay, you found a tenant and you rented it. Like, was it okay on the stabilization?
Yeah, it was amazing. Honestly, I would say almost got lucky with really good tenants from the beginning because when you're first starting, you just don't know how to screen tenants properly. You don't really know what you're doing, and we were trying to go about it really ourselves. So with time, you learn, but we got really lucky on that end that we got really, really great tenants. They did end up moving out after a year, but then at that point we just kept it going, and
Mhm.
honestly, the process was so smooth and everything went so well that we're like, hey, let's do it again. Let's do
Let's
it
buy
again.
another one. Okay, so
Yes,
then so
yes.
then you went on to look for a second property, a second condo.
It wasn't really a looking, it was very kind of casually browsing. You get so used to the process of constantly searching
Yeah.
that you're kind of just like, hey, let me see what's on the market. I'm just curious. And that's when we spotted a crazy deal. So we found a condo that was listed at a really, really low price. We were like, it's kind of that reaction of what's wrong with it, which is everyone's reaction, right? When there's something that looks like a good deal that no one's pouncing on.
Yeah.
But we put that aside, we're like, we'll do our due diligence, we'll do all of that. And yeah, we ended up purchasing that other property.
So then you're on your second rental unit, and
Mhm.
then what happened afterwards?
So that second rental unit actually had an inherited tenant.
Okay.
So it was owned by the construction company that built that building. It's a 2016 build. They owned it, they were renting it out, but the tenant was about to leave within the next couple of months. So they left. When we visited, there were kind of Sharpie marks on the wall. There were kids. It was a little, a little messy and stuff, but we saw past it. We knew that it was just a matter of, paint, clean it up, this, that. And so that's what we did. The tenant left. We painted everything, upgraded the countertops, upgraded the light fixtures, just tried to modernize it as low cost as possible. And then we got some new tenants in there.
Yeah. And then just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, with those long-term rentals, do you provide all the electros?
We don't. So the way that we started going about it is that we would include any appliances that were included with the sale. So for the first condo, that meant just the dishwasher.
Okay.
And it's worked out actually really well because the majority of our tenants ended up being people who had sold their home and were either downsizing and just looking for a rental, or they were waiting for new construction to be built, which has actually happened multiple times. So they took their appliances with them when they sold their previous property, and it was kind of just a place to stay for maybe a year and a half, and then move on. So far it's worked really well. Now is actually the first time that we're looking to rent out one of our units with appliances. And it's because that tenant, actually the one that I'm talking about now for that unit, is now moving on to their new construction property. And they said that they won't be taking their appliances. It doesn't fit in their new home, and they offered to sell it to us at a really great price. And just given also the time of the year, it is harder to rent out properties during the winter. We're like, hey, let's just keep the appliances. It's just going to attract better tenants. We got a good price on it. They're in amazing condition. They're all A+ tenants. So this is the first time actually that we're renting with all the appliances.
Okay. Yeah, and it makes sense. And
Yeah.
in our case, like we've pretty much we always rent with appliances just because in a way we find it easier and it minimizes the wear and tear and the damage. And like, I don't want to see stoves being carried in the staircase anymore. I just don't want to go through that and everything getting damaged and
there's the risk. There's the risk. Yeah.
And the dishwasher. And it makes me think of my friend Terry, who does a lot of property management. And she was like, at the beginning of July, we had so many problems. We need to send our own guy to connect the washer and dryer because we've had so many floods and leaks and so I just don't want to go through that. So I find there is really a premium in renting with all the appliances because you can charge $100 more, and so it's worth it as long as you put it on an annex of the lease.
Yeah, and you make it so that if there's anything that happens to those appliances, are your tenants responsible? Are you responsible? How do you go about that?
So we didn't put anything in writing. I think twice we had to send someone to go fix a washer, but so far it's been pretty good. It's just that we really ask that they get really cleaned up when the tenant leaves, and in any case we get a professional cleaning team. But that's just kind of the only kind of sticky points of like the state that it gets left in. But coming back to in your case, then you bought more because then you loved real estate so much that
we just kept going.
You kept going. Okay, so then what does your portfolio look like now? How many doors do you have?
Right now I have 4. So 5 total, including a personal residence. But for rentals it's 4, and during that time we also did a flip, did a couple other things, and also the long-term rentals were also used it as a medium-term rental temporarily, so we kind of mixed that in. And so at this point I've had the chance to do a little bit of everything, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then all those units are long-term tenant, long-term leases. Do you still have the original Airbnb?
No.
Okay.
So everything is a long-term rental right now. Definitely want to explore other strategies, especially next year, trying to get more into multifamily and things like that. But for now, it's all long-term rentals. Everything is super stable. Everything has, great tenants. So yeah, going well.
So far it worked out. And before we go any further, like this is why I'm
Hmm.
really happy to be sharing your story, because for a lot of people, real estate investing is scary, it's big decisions and stuff like that. But like you're the testament of it's possible. You're young, you were motivated, and within like 2 years, now you have 4 rental apartments that are getting paid by someone else. You're building equity. It's a little bit of management,
Hmm.
but I find this is like a great example of why real estate investing in some ways like makes a big difference in people's lives.
Oh,
And I'm
huge.
really happy. Yeah. And so in
Yeah.
what ways has it changed your life?
It is, oh my God, how can I even begin to explain? It's just done so many things. So first and foremost, just owning that type of asset, right? It's really it's kind of like your emergency fund in a way, right? If anything happens to you, if you need that money, not only do I have the cash flow coming in, but if I wanted to, I could use the equity. Worst case scenario, I could sell it if I wanted to. So there are a lot of things that I could do with that property. But in addition to that, I'm learning so much, right? Not just about how to buy rental property, but even managing tenants, right? We self-manage. So I manage all the tenants, all the issues, select my own tenants as well. Try to find, we have found all our own rental properties.
Yeah.
We have analyzed, all the different areas. We've run numbers for weeks trying to find the right rental property. We've made countless offers that we lost. So all of that has just been such a huge learning process.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say the biggest thing that it's done, it's honestly gave me the ability to just quit my 9 to 5 and jump into real estate as a realtor full time, which is not something that I think I would have been comfortable with had I not had those rental properties as backup.
Yeah. And that experience of you've been through
Yeah,
transactions, you know what it's like to own and
exactly.
to manage. And
Exactly.
it's a huge confidence boost.
Oh, huge, huge, huge,
Hmm.
huge. I pretty much, most people start off as a realtor, brand new, fresh, maybe they've bought their own personal residence, but I had done so many transactions at that time. I had put in so many offers, even though, a lot of them were not accepted.
Yeah.
But just that experience that I learned was incredibly helpful. Not to mention that my properties are really all over the place, not just in one specific location, which means that I was able to gain knowledge about so many different neighborhoods and areas, not only in Montreal, but just around Montreal as well.
Hmm.
So it's helped on so many levels.
Okay. And then, so you said like you liked it so much, you became a broker. So that's
Yeah.
commitment. That's like you fell in love and then went the whole way. You got married.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was really enjoying it. People were starting to ask me questions. I realized that I was just loving talking about it all the time. And, we were so heavily in it that it just made sense
Yeah.
as the next natural step. And I didn't even necessarily plan to go into it full time. I just knew that I wanted to get my license. And I was like, hey, maybe I'll start off doing it on the side. But once the time came, I'm like, no, I'm jumping into this full time. It's happening.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess you
Yeah.
get well, first you get some access to some good information through I was gonna say through Centris and the system, but then
Yeah.
you're forced to be involved. Well, your job is to be involved and to make transactions happen that you would have never gotten involved in. And so I could really see the attraction. And other than the lucrative side of it,
Yeah.
I mean, you do make a commission and you have to make a living, but it's just
Hmm.
that you go through a number of transactions, and that's a fabulous learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just on the other side, right? So before it was me as a buyer, kind of freaking out, we're going to get an accepted offer. What's happening? What's happening? I'm not there listening to the brokers, communicating amongst each other. So it's interesting being on the other side of that
Yeah.
and now being the one trying to get my buyers deals. So
Mhm.
yeah, and all the experience that I've gained so far has just helped.
Yeah. And so you've also been very successful into that process because you give a lot of information, and you have quite a following on social media, and particularly on Instagram because that's all I've looked. But and I shouldn't say but, and
That's all I use.
yeah, that's all you use. And a lot of people follow you because you actually give some really good advice. And how
Thank
did that
you.
come about? Like sharing your story on social media, has it been helpful? And in what ways did you feel like it propelled you?
So helpful. Initially, it started with just being an investor. I was like, hey, I want to start sharing my journey. I want to share whatever I'm learning and kind of really just document the process and be able to look back and say, hey, remember when we were doing this? Remember this project or that project? It's just so fun to still look back to this day at, that first rental property or just that every single first that I've been through. It's just so cool. So I started documenting it. I realized a lot of people were doing it on Instagram. There were a lot of investors, and we all just connected, started sharing what we were doing, what we were learning. And it was just also a really great way to learn from other people and ask questions. So we were all really just exchanging knowledge. And I was just sharing things that I was learning throughout the process, which is something that I still do as a realtor. So most of the things I share is something that I've either personally been through, I'm currently going through, someone has recently asked me the question. It's all things that I'm kind of experiencing, and I'm like, hey, I know that other people could benefit from knowing this information too. But yeah, just to go back to starting my page off as an investor, I knew that it would be helpful also just to start building a page, building kind of my brand, also to end up being a realtor down the line. So yeah, it just transitioned from really an investor focused page to kind of investor plus realtor. Right now, I'm kind of more on the realtor side, but once I take on my next project, I'm going to incorporate that, of course, in my page as well. So it's kind of just a mishmash right now of investing and working as a realtor.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
as you are looking for properties for your clients, do you ever stumble upon some where you're like, damn, if they don't buy it, I would?
Oh my God, yes. There's been a lot of times. There've been times where I've found properties and it's like you're, especially as a first time investor, right? It's like you're trying to explain why it is a good deal. And especially I just remember as a new investor, it took me so long to figure out how to go about it, what made sense as an investment property. So I always understand the hesitation of buying your first
Yeah.
rental property. But it's like now that I've done a number of transactions. When I see something that looks like a good deal, I'm like, okay, I don't need to really think about it that much. I can kind of go, but it's also not something that I'm looking to do immediately right now. It's not my focus. So I've stepped back for just at least a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
mostly this year, I would say. But yeah, it happens all the time where I'm like, hey, at least even if you don't buy this and I don't buy this, I definitely want to find someone else who's gonna buy this.
Yeah.
It's a good deal.
This is a good deal over here. Will someone please buy
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, and I do share it, right? I share
Yeah.
opportunities with other investors, other people that I have relationships with already. If my client is saying, hey, I don't want to go for it, I'm not ready, I don't want it, and we've had that conversation, then I will still try to find a buyer for that property.
Yeah. Yeah. And then having a little bit of a following and a network just allows you to just be able to take that listing and send it around, be like, hey, I think this is a good deal. If someone is interested, let me
Mm-hmm.
know. Because you never know. Like out of 1,000 people who follow you, you might get 5 questions. And who
Mm-hmm.
knows? It might lead
Mm-hmm.
to a transaction, an offer and a
Exactly.
transaction and all that. So
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
always helps. And I know that going through your reels, sometimes you've had some really good ones. There's one that made me laugh recently, was about someone taking a poo in a bathroom that
Color
doesn't
proof.
work.
Yeah.
And I've heard of other stories like that, but anyways, I'll let people go and discover
That
go.
didn't happen to me. That didn't happen, but it did happen to someone I know, which again was the inspiration. So sometimes it's other people's experiences, right? I'll hear stories, I'll hear things that happen to other people, and I'm like, this is too good. I have to share it somehow.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with that.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
then looking back over the last, like the progression of your last 3 years, like now you said you're at 4 rental properties, you gotten your license, you're a broker, you really got your foot in the industry. Like looking back on your experience, like what is it that you would do differently?
Ooh, that's a
Because
good
because it's
question.
so easy to say like, what have you learned and stuff like that, but that you just shared.
Yeah.
What I like to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
sometimes, like we
Yeah.
learn more from our mistakes, and I'm not saying you made mistakes. I'm just saying like when we go
Yeah.
through the process of like, what would I improve? What would I do differently? I find there's a very different set of answers.
Mm-hmm. You know what? It's a good question, but as much as I've made little mistakes here and there, I take a lot of very calculated risks. I
Mm-hmm.
don't just do things just to do things. I make sure, every time I purchase something, I have like multiple exit strategies. I've analyzed it from every angle. And I've looked at every single thing that could go right, could go wrong, as best as I can. I don't think there's anything I don't think there's anything necessarily that I would do differently. I think something that could have been really interesting, though, for me, more as a primary residence, would have been a house hack,
Yeah.
which is something that I would highly recommend to new investors that are, not necessarily super comfortable buying a whole separate rental property, or people who are looking for a primary residence but still want to have a rental property at the same time. House hacking would have been a really, really good idea.
Hmm.
Also from either from the beginning or as a rental property, but obviously a lot of the time that means a duplex, right?
Yeah.
Which is a higher price point. So it depends on your budget also.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything I would have necessarily done differently, but I do think something that could have been interesting if I had the time, which I didn't during the pandemic, would have been to get my license sooner,
Earlier.
really, and just be able to also take advantage of that pandemic boom. But I did take advantage of it, but more on the investor side. And
Hmm.
honestly, I was swamped with my day job and managing rental properties and finding tenants when there was turnover and water infiltrations and then doing a flip at the same time. It was
It
it was
was
a
too
lot.
much.
It was a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
there were points where it was really a lot. I had no extra time, so there's no way I could have been doing school on the side too.
Hmm. Yeah. Very demanding.
Yeah, so I did it when I could, but that would have been really cool, right? Because everything was just so fast paced. The market was on fire. Everyone was just doing so many transactions. So it could have been a fun learning experience also.
Yeah. And so now, having looked back a little bit, like, what do you see and what can we wish you for the next 3 to 5 years?
Ooh, what do I see? As in investor wise or realtor wise, both?
Yeah, in terms of for
Bit
your
of both.
experience and your progression on your path.
Yeah. Um, so the reason I also went into real estate and getting my license is there were a multitude of reasons. So one of them was being able to help other people, um, with their purchases, with their investments, accomplish whatever they wanted to accomplish. But I also wanted a level of time freedom, right? So I'm not looking to necessarily be super swamped and super busy 24 hours a day. I'm enjoying the balance that I currently have, and I'd like to do my best to maintain that really. I am looking to keep purchasing investment properties as early as next year. That would be my plan. I'd like to also take on bigger projects.
Go in
So
multifamily.
yeah, so exactly. So multifamily, a burr would be really nice and on my list for next year. That's definitely something that I want to jump into. And then on the realtor side, really keep going the way that I'm going, keep building my clientele, keep building my client base, keep going on Instagram. So I'm happy with the way that I've started off. And I know that it's naturally just going to keep progressing and keep, keep going the way that it's going.
Yeah, keep pushing it. Keep pushing it.
Yeah.
You've been on a really good path. So, roughly, so which agency are you with now?
I'm with MU Mobilier right now.
Okay, and it's been what?
Yeah.
It's been six months.
Yeah, I just hit 6 months in like 5 days ago.
Woo! Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, the first
Thank
milestone will be
you.
1 year, but we'll
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll celebrate it with you. So, as we're getting towards the end here, where can people find out more about you, and what's the best way to reach out?
So, number one, in terms of just being able to learn more about my background and being able to see my content, it's definitely Instagram. So my handle is at el.realty. Don't forget the dot because there's someone else that stole the other one. el.realty. And so that's where I share really all my content. And over there, I also have a link where you could book a free consultation with me through Calendly. So it's super quick. I really have all my resources there. I do have, my business Facebook page, which is really just under my name, so Eliane Levinzon. In terms of my contact information, again, it's all on my Instagram, but email address is info@elrealty.ca. My phone number for any direct access is 514-655-5698. So yeah, in a nutshell, those are really the best ways to get a hold of me. I pride myself in being super responsive, and that's also why I've been able to to kind of progress nicely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really easy to get a hold of. Whatever is easier for you, whether it's DM, whether it's email, phone, text,
They will have the
I'll
choice.
respond. Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys have any choice you want, and I'll respond to you.
You gave them plenty of options.
Yeah,
I'm glad we
pick
finally
one.
yeah, and I'm glad we finally did this episode because and I've said it already a little bit, but I really want to rehash like your story. You bought 4 units over a 2-year period. It's a testament that it is possible for everyone to start. If you can do it, if I can
It
do
is.
it, everyone listening can do it. You just need to put your mind to it. You just need to get educated. You need to get in consistent and regular action because that's what makes you succeed.
It is.
So,
It is. And it was a lot of self-learning. I didn't even take a course. I didn't do anything like that. And so I know there's a lot of analysis paralysis when people are starting. You feel like you need to know absolutely everything in order to start. But the reality is that you're going to be learning as you go, and it's
yeah.
normal. And the more transactions you do, the more you're going to learn. And I still am not even remotely close to knowing it all. I'm still constantly learning every day. And there's always something to learn in real
Mhm.
estate.
Mhm. Absolutely. Very well said. Well, everyone listening, soak it in, listen to it again. If you have any questions, please reach out to Eliane directly. It's the easiest way. And thank you very much for listening. Again, share this conversation with a friend who you think could benefit from it and get inspired, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is to give you the inspiration and the confidence that you can do it too. On this wonderful note, have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you. Calling out.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Axel.
Thank you very much.